Michael Girdley says TED is dead, he's wrong. And if you believe him, it could cost you your bookings. I organized the first TEDx Moncton in 2013. I've volunteered at these events since then, and I've seen what this platform can do. I've seen it from the inside, from an organizer standpoint, from a volunteer standpoint, and I know the value that this can bring for speakers. When a creator says TED is dead and basically irrelevant, well, guess what? I have something to say about that. Now, I have to say, Michael Girdley is a really smart guy. His channel is great. He does amazing business breakdowns, and some of what he says about TED is accurate. But here's the problem. He's looking at TED as a media brand, and that's entirely the wrong lens if you are a speaker looking to decide whether or not you should use this as a strategic platform for yourself. Those are two entirely different questions. And so in this video, I'm going to show you exactly what he got right, where he went wrong, and tell you what you actually need to be thinking about with regards to TEDx to make a smart business decision for your speaking business. So let's get into it. The original magic of TED was trust. If something carried the TED name, you knew it was going to be good. You knew it was going to be worth your time. And that was really the whole value proposition. And that trust was built through curation. The speakers, the ideas, the format. And then in 2009, TED launched TEDx, which is what I helped organize, which was about allowing independent local organizers to run their own TED branded events. Now, in theory, brilliant. About democratizing ideas, spread the format globally, give local communities a platform. The problem was, in practice, the quality control basically became nearly impossible, as you can imagine. Some local organizers were meticulous. I know for myself, in our case, we were diligent, but others, maybe not so much. And as you can imagine, when you scale to 44,000 events in 150 countries, that signal to noise ratio is really going to suffer. I mean, look at examples. Elizabeth Holmes. Yeah. Theranos, Elizabeth Holmes. She actually pitched at TEDx in 2014. There was also an instance where a comedian once bluffed his way into a TEDx, showed up dressed as a Roman gladiator, if you can believe that, and delivered complete nonsense, and he got a standing ovation. No one in the room stopped to say, wait, is this real? And really, that's a curation failure. Girdley is right about it. In the flagship TED conference, not TEDx, but the main event, has drifted into a direction that conflicts with its stated mission. So $12,500 for a ticket. Imagine that. $25,000 for a donor status. A 2023 attendee wrote publicly about their experience, and the story they told was not about the ideas, it was about the billionaires that they met. And so here's the uncomfortable part. Speakers actually present for free. So they do the work, they take the stage, they carry the content, and attendees are paying 5 figures to be in that room. And so the tension is real, and Girdley identifies it correctly. When a platform built on ideas worth spreading becomes a premium networking event for the wealthy, it has drifted from its mission. That is worth saying. One of the things that Michael talked about in his video was in 2024, TED brought in speakers whose primary platform was actually focused on politics. And what happened in the aftermath was staff and fellows actually resigned in protest. And I understand why that's concerning. TED's value was always that it transcended politics and political tribes. It was a place where someone who was conservative and someone more progressive could both find something worth thinking about and engaging with it. And of course, nowadays, that's increasingly hard to find. Now, I'll come back to this in a moment. I don't think bringing diverse perspectives to a stage is inherently wrong, but how you do it really matters. And TED's execution here has been, to put it generously, clumsy. So Girdley makes some fair observations, but here's what I think about where he goes significantly wrong. And that's why it matters if you're a speaker. Point number 1, the brand feels basically irrelevant. This is really his core claim, and I want to be really direct. I think that's his perception. It's not supported by data. So here's some actual numbers as of early 2026. Combined YouTube subscribers across TED, TEDx, and TED-Ed, 93 million. Monthly views across those channels is approximately 100 million. Every single month. Those TEDx channels alone have 44 million subscribers and 8.8 billion, with a B, cumulative views. Now, here's what's interesting about who's watching. The primary age demographic is actually 25 to 34 years old. It's roughly a third of the total audience. That is not a platform aging out. That is the next generation of professionals who are actively using it. And 54% of that audience is female. So that's well beyond the tech and business niche that Girdley operates in. And here's the one that really matters for this conversation. Only 31% of TED's traffic comes from the US. This is a global platform. And so when someone in Girdley's circle stops dropping, "I'm a TED speaker" as a flex, that might be telling us something about his specific social circle, but maybe not so much about TED's global relevance. Now, speaking of relevance, in looking up Michael Girdley, and I've followed him for a while, so I know this, he describes himself as an unofficial Chili's ambassador. So not to be dismissive, and I really do enjoy his content, but maybe his cultural barometer is not perfectly calibrated for this conversation. Here's the second point where Michael goes wrong. Measuring by virality is the wrong metric for speakers. This is really the central mistake in his entire analysis, and flows directly from the fact that he's thinking about TED as a media property. He views success in views, cultural cachet, media relevance, and those are absolutely the right metrics if you were a media company. But you are not a media company. You are a speaker. And speakers measure success in terms of things like bookings, credibility signals, and in what opens the doors with the buyers who actually hire them. Think about it this way. A TEDx talk, 800 views, that gets watched by the right conference organizer who's assembling a program in your niche is infinitely worth more than your business with 100,000 views from people who are not going to hire you. And I think of things like books. Reading is down. Attention spans are shrinking. And by Girdley's logic, authors should really stop writing books because fewer people are reading. But we all know that's not how credibility works. A published book still signals expertise and experience and commitment, and the ability to develop a sustained argument. It opens doors. It's a calling card. And the sales numbers, they really don't determine its value to the author's career. And TEDx works the same way. The view count is really beside the point. The third point where Michael goes wrong is distribution is not inherently bad. The curation failure is an execution problem. So he frames the TEDx expansion as the original sin. I understand the logic. More events, more dilution, eroding trust that's established. But democratizing access to ideas, giving more communities a platform to share local voices and more diverse voices, that's not a bad idea. The problem wasn't the concept. The problem was that TED failed to adequately vet the people running these events. And they scaled the format, but key, not the standards. That is an execution failure, and it's a strategic mistake inside a fundamentally good idea. Think about examples like Forbes 30 Under 30. There are lots of frauds in those lists. Just go look. It doesn't mean that Forbes is irrelevant, but they need better vetting in their processes. The fourth point where Girdley gets it wrong is that attention spans shrinking does not mean your ideas are worthless. So he cites some research showing average content spans have collapsed from about 2.5 minutes in 2004 down to about 45 seconds today. And I get it. In a TikTok world where the user decides that they want to swipe, that's about 1.7 seconds. And so his argument is that TED's longer format, ranging from 7 minutes and up, is stuck in a dead zone. It's too short for deep dive and too long for the short form world. Now, he is describing a real phenomenon, but the conclusion he draws that somehow this diminishes TED's value reflects a particular worldview I'd like to push back on. Algorithms should not be the arbiters of what has intellectual worth. The fact that the average attention span is shrinking and has been compressed by decades of optimized media consumption does not mean that longer form content like TED Talks or TEDx Talks are less valuable. It might actually mean that it's more valuable because the ability to hold attention for 7, 12, 18, 20 minutes on a single idea is increasingly rare. And data supports this. We look at examples like long-form podcasts. Joe Rogan can go for 3 hours. The Acquired podcast goes for 6. Deep expertise is truly having a moment. The fifth point that I want to make is about bringing diverse perspectives to a stage isn't automatically bad. This is a point I want to spend a little bit of time on because I think it's actually the more nuanced part of the conversation. So Girdley frames TED's move into political territory as bad because it created conflict, it caused resignations, it alienated people. And yeah, those are very real things. But the underlying idea that a platform should bring together people from different ends of the political and ideological spectrum and facilitate genuine conversation and dialogue, that is not a bad idea. That's actually supported by a significant body of research. Jonathan Haidt, as an example from NYU, has spent most of his career studying political polarization. And his core argument is that each side of the political divide understands certain moral truths, and meanwhile, they may be blind to others. And the antidote for that blindness is actual exposure to other perspectives. There was another study out of the UK that found with Labour and Conservative voters, even a 10-minute unmoderated chat increased empathy across political lines. So here's my point. A thoughtful, curated salon that brings together different perspectives in genuine dialogue is not a problem. It might actually be part of TED's highest purpose. The failure isn't that TED invited people with different political views. The failure is whether it was designed to generate genuine exchange or whether it just booked controversy for attention. One more thing worth saying. This is very much an American conversation. Only 31% of TED's audience is American. The political polarization that Girdley is describing, the whole concept of culture wars, is not a global story. And so for speakers with international audience or aspirations, this is even a smaller concern than it appears. So here's point 6 of where Girdley went wrong, which is platform decline does not equal negative brand equity for creators. Now, let me ask you something. Do you remember Vine? That was the whole short form video platform that Twitter shut down in 2017. Some of the biggest names in digital media today actually booked and built their audiences on Vine. Nobody looks at a Vine creator and says, oh, you're on a dead platform, that doesn't count. Here's another one. What about Quibi? Remember that platform that spent billions and billions of dollars building and making short form content that was shut down. Quibi launched in 2020 with billions in funding and collapsed within months. It had experienced senior leadership, it had all the right pedigree, and yet, you know what? It shut down. The work that creators made for Quibi doesn't necessarily mean that they have negative brand equity. It just means that Quibi didn't succeed. And so this aspect of platform mortality is really a part of the modern media landscape. Creators aren't blamed for the platforms that they were built on, and the work really outlasts the platform. Now, TED could reach a point where it just genuinely does not move the needle for speakers. That could happen. But that is a future problem. It is not a current problem. And even then, if you have built some credibility by using TED or TEDx as a platform, you are not going to be remembered negatively for that. All right, so we've been going through what Michael Girdley got wrong, and now I want to reflect on what actually matters for you, the speaker. What should you be doing with all of this? The first thing I want you to think about is your buyer's perception matters more than any pundit's opinion or perspective. Here's the most important thing I can tell you. It really doesn't matter what Michael Girdley thinks. It matters what your buyers think. So that's the event organizers, conference planners, corporate clients that actually hire speakers. And right now, event organizers still use TEDx as a signal of stage competence. It tells them that you have been through a competitive process to be selected, that you can actually hold an audience, and you know how to construct and to deliver an idea. That signal has not disappeared. And I have not seen any evidence that it has collapsed. Critically, you need to monitor this. You need to stay close to your buyers, have those conversations. And when you are speaking to organizers, ask them, what do you look for when you're evaluating speakers? How do you choose a speaker? Does TEDx factor into that? If so, how? Their answer are the pieces of intelligence and insight that matter for you, not some YouTube teardown. So if you are hearing, TEDx really doesn't matter to me that much anymore from the people that hire you, that may be a signal. Now, just because one person says it doesn't mean that you should just leap away from it. But if you start hearing that over and over, you need to think about that strategically in terms of what that means for you. You need to be listening. Now, not all TEDx stages are equal. And this is where your due diligence really matters. And this is something that Girdley actually completely missed. It's probably the most actionable thing in this entire video. When your TEDx talk goes online, your audience does not see the whole event. They only see one thing, which is your video. And that video, the production quality, the audio, the lighting, the stage, they become permanent assets which are attached to your name. And a bad TEDx with muddy audio quality, bad fluorescent lighting, it doesn't help you. It can actually actively work against you. So before you say yes to any TEDx opportunity, you need to do your homework. Look it up. Look up the venue. See if they've been there before. Watch past talks. How's the audio? How's the lighting? Are they still using the same vendors? Are they using the same stage? Are they using the same setup? Have they learned from previous years? And these are questions that you can ask the organizers even before you apply. Is this genuinely aligned with your positioning and with your niche? And one other key thing, can you negotiate filming rights? Can you bring your own videographer? In some cases, they might be able to say yes. There may be some limitations where they can't. But knowing their production quality in advance actually tells you whether or not this opportunity is a good asset or if it's going to be a liability even before you commit. A strategic TEDx with a well-produced stage in your exact niche is genuinely valuable. A poorly produced TEDx with a theme that has nothing to do with your work might be worse than nothing. So choose accordingly. Now, the process itself has standalone value. That's something that doesn't show up in view count from videos. And as an example, Terry Kingston, who's been coaching speakers for TEDx stages since 2015, put it really well. She said, "The red dot doesn't amplify you, it refines you." Preparing a TEDx talk is one of the most intensive speaker development experiences available. You have just minutes. You have one idea. There's no hiding behind some big slide deck or some meandering Q&A. You really have to know your material up front. You have to construct it with precision, and you have to deliver it under real pressure. You get one shot. That process makes you a better speaker. It sharpens your keynote. It clarifies your positioning, and it forces you to articulate your very best idea in its most distilled form. And so even if that video never goes viral, even if it only gets 400 views and lives quietly on YouTube, that preparation made you sharper. That value is real, and it doesn't show up anywhere in Michael's analysis. TEDx is one leg of the speaker stool, not the whole chair. TEDx, it is really meaningful, and it can be powerful, but it's not the whole structure. What you do before the talk, that is your positioning, your niche alignment, making sure that the event is strategically right and a fit for your brand. What you do after the talk, that matters even more. How do you follow up? How do you repurpose the content? How do you activate the audience and the organizers that you met in that room? Most speakers just hit publish and wait. They treat TEDx talk like the destination, and it's not. It is a tool. And like any tool, its value depends entirely on how you use it. Now, you may be thinking about, are there other alternatives? Are there other options? The answer is yes. TEDx is not the only game in town. And part of being strategic means knowing your options. As an example, talks at Google. That's a platform that's worth paying attention to. It is a high signal format that's typically tied to a serious body of work, whether it's a book or research or finding a movement. And being invited to speak at Google signals that someone vetted you as a sophisticated person that's worth the audience's time. That carries real credibility, arguably more targeted to certain professional buyers than any general TEDx. Your niche conference flagship stage may also be much more meaningful to buyers than any TEDx. So as an example, if you're speaking to healthcare executives and you're the opening keynote at a major conference, that may actually do more for your business than a TEDx with high viewership. So you need to know your buyers, know what they value, know what they respect. TEDx is one option. It's a good option when used strategically, but it's not the only option. So let me bring this home. Michael Girdley asked the question, is TED dying? And from his vantage point, as a business media creator, analyzing a platform's cultural influence, that is a legitimate question. And he makes some really fair observations. But as a speaker, that is not your question. Your question is actually, does TEDx create value for my career right now? And how can I use it strategically if it does? The data says the platform is not dying. 93 million subscribers, 100 million views a month, a primary audience that is young, global, and actively engaged. That's not a eulogy, that is infrastructure. And what Girdley correctly identifies that TED has made some strategic mistakes, and I agree. Diluted curation, elitist pricing, clumsy political navigation. Those are very, very real, but none of them change the fundamental calculus for a speaker choosing whether or not to pursue a TEDx. Great ideas are still rare, and stages that curate them still carry weight. And what speakers who treat TEDx as a strategic tool and a strategic opportunity rather than a trophy or some gold star, they are the ones that are going to use it well. If this is the kind of strategic thinking about your speaking business that resonates with you, I would love to hear your take in the comments. Have you ever done a TEDx? Are you considering one? What do the event organizers in your world have to say about it? That is a conversation worth having. And if you want to think more systematically about how to build and grow a speaking business, not just TEDx, but the whole picture, check out the link in the description. I'll see you in the next one.